Hello and welcome. On 27th December, the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs has come up with a circular. This circular is related to difference in input tax credit in GSTR3B as compared to GSTR2A. This circular gives out the procedure to GST officers on how to deal with such ITC differences. In this video, we are going to talk about this circular in detail and understand as taxpayers what do we have to do if there is a difference in the ITC in our GSTR3B as compared to GSTR2A. But before we begin, for those who are unfamiliar, let's understand certain definitions. Input tax credit, that is ITC, is the GST that you pay on your purchases, be it purchase of goods or services. This ITC can be adjusted against the GST that you have to pay on your sales. Next, GSTR3B. It is a summary of sales and purchases which is required to be filed by taxpayers. This can be done once in a month or once in a quarter depending upon the option that you have chosen. That is, if you have opted for QRMP scheme, that is quarterly returns with monthly payment, then once in a quarter, otherwise once in a month. If you would like to know more about QRMP scheme, you may consider watching my earlier video, the link in the top right corner. GSTR3B is the document in which we avail the ITC. Then GSTR2A. It is a dynamic statement of input tax credit. It is dynamic because as and when new transactions are reported, GSTR2A would be updated to that extent. It is auto-populated on the basis of GSTR1 filed by your suppliers. GSTR1 is a summary of sales which is required to be filed by your suppliers either once in a month or once in a quarter depending upon the option chosen. This GSTR2A is effective from October 2019 to December 2021 because in Jan 2022 it was replaced with GSTR2B, which is a static statement of input tax credit, unlike GSTR2A, which is a dynamic statement. Now let us understand why would there be this difference of ITC. It can be because of four reasons. First, if your supplier has not filed GSTR1, then the transaction would not appear in your GSTR2A. Second, your supplier has filed GSTR1, but this particular transaction is not reported. Even then, it would not appear in your GSTR2A. Third, if your supplier has declared B2B transaction as a B2C transaction, that is, instead of mentioning your GSTIN, the supplier has declared it as a B2C, that is business to customer transaction. If so, this transaction would not get reflected in your GSTR2A. Fourth, your supplier has provided wrong GSTIN. That is, instead of providing your GSTIN, your supplier has provided GSTIN of some other taxpayer. Even then, the transaction would not appear in your GSTR2A. So the difference in ITC can be because of any of these four reasons. Now let us see, to avail this ITC in your GSTR3B, what requirements do you have to fulfill? First, you should have tax invoice. Second, you should have received goods or services. Third, your supplier should have paid taxes. Fourth, you should be regular in filing your GST returns. Fifth, the transaction should appear in your GSTR2B. This fifth condition, that is the transaction should appear in your GSTR2B, is effective from 1st Jan 2022. So till December 2021, you could avail input tax credit in your GSTR3B as long as you satisfy the remaining four conditions. But whenever there was a difference of ITC that you have claimed in your GSTR3B and your GSTR2A, the GST department used to send notice asking you to either pay the difference of tax or reverse ITC along with interest. But if you observe here, to avail input tax credit in your GSTR3B, GSTR2A is not at all relevant. As long as you satisfy the remaining 4 conditions up to December 2021, you could avail input tax credit in your GSTR3B. Now, the GST department has understood this issue, so it has come up with this circular and it has specified the procedure for GST officers on how to deal with such ITC differences. Now let us see what do you have to do if you receive such notice or if you have already received such notice. You need to remember 5 important things here. First, you should have supporting documents for the ITC that you have availed. It can be a tax invoice or a debit note from your supplier. If it is related to RCM, that is reverse charge mechanism, then you should have generated self invoice. If it is related to import of goods, then bill of entry and so on. Second, for purchase of goods on which you have availed ITC, you should have GRN, that is goods receipt note, for having received the goods. 3. Proof of payment that you have made to the supplier. It can be your bank statement. Plus, if the difference in ITC is more than 5 lakh and this difference of 5 lakh is for a supplier during the financial year, then you need to ask your supplier to provide you a certificate issued by a CA or CMA in practice, and this certificate should state that the supplier has actually made this supply and tax for it is paid in GSTR3B. Now this certificate issued by CA or CMA in practice should have UDIN, that is Unique Document Identification Number. It is an 18-digit system generated number. If the certificate has UDIN, then you can check the authenticity of this certificate online. If you want to know how, you can check links in the description. But if the difference in ITC is up to 5 lakh for a supplier during the financial year, then instead of this certificate from CA or CMA in practice, the supplier can self-certify stating that the supply is actually made by the supplier and tax is paid in GSTR3B. Fourth, the ITC that you have availed in your GSTR3B should not be an ineligible credit. Under GST, input tax credit for certain transactions is specifically disallowed or blocked. If you would like to know more about ineligible credit, you may consider watching my earlier video, the link in the top right corner. So ensure that the ITC that you have availed in your GSTR3B is not an ineligible credit. Fifth, you should have availed this ITC in your GSTR3B within the time limit specified. Now, if you are a monthly filer, then time limit would be by 20th October of the subsequent year till financial year 2021. Except for financial year 17-18, for which the time limit was 20th April 2019, if I am not mistaken. From financial year 21-22 onwards by 30th November of the subsequent year. So if you fulfill these 5 requirements, that is you should have tax invoice, GRN, proof of payment like CA or CMA certificate wherever necessary, or self-certification from the supplier. It shouldn't be an ineligible credit. You should have availed ITC within the time limit. If so, the ITC that you have availed in your GSTR3B would be valid whether or not it appears in your GSTR2A. Now, this circular has some riders. That is, whatever procedure we have discussed so far, it is going to be applicable only for financial year 17-18 and financial year 18-19. I do not understand why it is restricted only to 2 years, because GSTR2A is effective till December 2021. So I think this procedure should be extended till December 2021. Next, this procedure is applicable only for ongoing proceedings. That is, if you have received a scrutiny notice or any audit or investigation is initiated against you, or any adjudication or appeal proceedings are pending, only in those situations this procedure is going to be applicable. To put it differently, if the proceedings have already been completed, then this is not going to be applicable, which I feel is unfair. To sum it up, if you fulfill these 5 requirements that we have just discussed, The ITC that you have availed in your GSTR3B is neither required to be reversed nor you would be required to pay the difference of tax whether or not the transaction appears in your GSTR2A. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching.